welcome back to Inverted Aviators RC. This is part 3 of the how to build an IA Evo, and we are going to be focusing on the transmitter, how to actually connect this big thing to this new receiver that we put in. And I think that the easiest and the best way to do it is through the EdgeTx Companion App, which is available on your computer. So what I'm going to do is connect my transmitter to my computer, and then we'll get started from there. I figured I should probably show how to connect a transmitter to your computer. So what you'll want to do first is take your transmitter. In this case, I have a Tyrannus X9D Plus. I'm going to hold the trims on the bottom here in, and then I'm going to turn it on. And what that's going to do is you can see the screen now says write firmware and exit, and this is the bootloader. So then I'm going to open up the EdgeTx Companion App, which I will link in the description. And once that's all downloaded, you can open it and it'll look like this gray screen. So then I'm going to take a cable here and plug it into the back of my transmitter. So it's just right there. You can tell that worked because on the screen it says USB connected. It might be hard to see, but just believe me, it says USB connected. And then we're going to click over here on the read models from the settings and the radio. That's up here. I'll make it a little bit easier to see, but read models. And as you can see here, this is the screen where we're going to actually make the model. So I'm going to switch over and start recording on this screen, and I'll be back in just a second. All right, now that we are actually recording the right screen, we are going to create a new model. So we're going to go up here and double click in this extra spot, which is going to bring up the model wizard, which really is super helpful for setting up new planes. So I'm going to name this model the IA Evo because it's the Inverted Aviators Evo. We're going down to plane. We're going to click next. Does it have an engine? Yes, of course. The throttle channel, in this case, because this is a spectrum-based receiver, it goes in the channel order of TAER, or throttle, aileron, elevator, rudder. So in this case, throttle channel is on 1. The wing type, it's a standard wing. It's not a delta wing or a flying wing. Does your model have ailerons? Yes. And they are controlled by a single channel. Remember, in the build video, there's a Y lead that connects the aileron, so this is controlled by a single channel. And also remember the TAER, the A for aileron comes second, therefore it's on channel 2. Does it have flaps? Yes, of course it has flaps. It's really cool. It's controlled by a single channel, and in this case, we're going to be putting it on channel number 5. And so we're going to click next. Does it have air brakes? No, we don't, unfortunately. That'd be really cool, but we do not. Which tail type? We have an elevator and a rudder, so we're just going to leave it at elevator and rudder. And again, TAE, E for elevator. E comes third, and R is fourth, so that's perfectly fine, just like that. So we're going to click next. We do want a throttle cut. I don't have a throttle timer or a flight timer, but you can add those in if you want. I do like the throttle cut. And save changes, all of this fun stuff. Yes, let's do that. So again, we got the model name, we have the type, options, throttle, all that looks good to me. So we click finish, and now we have the IA Evo right below. So let's double click into that, and we can see our whole big screen of fun stuff. So to start, we got the name at the top, and then moving on, we don't have any timers or any of this stuff. We got them set to silent. That's perfectly fine. And then we're going to down to the throttle source, which is coming from the throttle channel. Makes sense. Throttle trim idle only, like we left off. The throttle warning, that's what we just checked. That's saying that when you turn your transmitter on, it'll give you a little heads up saying, hey, your throttle's on. Do you want to turn that off? And so I like to have that selected, a little extra layer of safety. And then we can keep moving on. Everything looks fine so far. Custom throttle warning, I don't have one. For the trim step, there is different options here. You can have fine, exponential, and all these. The difference is this defines the amount of increase or decrease in trim when the trim switch is pressed. So that just means like if you click trim, do you want to do a whole lot or a whole little? Coarse is the most at 1.6%. Then we go medium at 0.8, fine at 0.4, extra fine 0.2, and then exponential is 0.2, but then it gets larger as you get further away from the center. I like it having it fine. It's right in the middle. It has just a little bit of 0.4% change when I click the trim, but if you want to change it to do whatever you want, go for it. Moving on to extended limits. Now, extended limits increases the minimum and maximum range for the output values to 150 and negative 150 instead of negative 100 to 100. So this pretty much says, do you want to have your throws be more? I like that, so I click that so we can have a little extra range out of our transmitter. Extended trims, display checklist, this is all fine. Moving on to display trims, I have that as never. I also have no center beeps because I can usually tell if things are centered or not. One other thing I'm going to change here is the switch warning. So this is also when you turn your transmitter on, it'll say, hey, these switches are flipped. Do you want that? Yes or no? I only want that for my throttle channel, or my kill switch, excuse me, which I put on the SF channel. So I'm going to unclick all of these other ones. Again, this will just say, hey, your kill switch is off. Do you want to turn that on? I'll say yes. I'm perfectly fine with that. On the internal radio system, I have it set to off unless if you have the built-in 4-in-1 module, you will have this on. I don't. I have an external module, so I'm going to set this to multi because it is a multi-protocol 4-in-1 module. So we're going to go down to multi-radio protocol, and I'm going to set this to DSM. This is for the spectrum. So let's see. Let's go alphabetical probably. DSM. Perfect. And then we are going to do start at channel 1, and we only have 8 channels because we have the normal throttle, aileron, elevator, rudder. Then we have 1 for flaps, 1 for safe, and 1 for pan and tilt, which is our head tracker. So we only need 1 through 8. DSM, perfect. Receiver number 0, that's fine. The subtype, I have it as DSM-X2F. And then I have disabled telemetry because the flyby telemetry that comes on the 8-channel receiver that I have is a little screwy because it's going through a non-spectrum transmitter. So it was just getting annoying, so I turned it off. And same with the disabled channel map. I'm going to turn that on. And that's because the normal channel setup for a Tyrannus is, I think, AETR, Aileron, Elevator, Throttle, Rudder. And that will mess with our channel setup for the spectrum mode. So I just disabled it and it's not being used. Make sure to leave low power mode unchecked and everything else is good to go. One last very important thing on this slide. The trainer port is going to be master and jack, and that's because we are going to be using the jack port in the back of our transmitter to get 2 channels from our head tracking module. So selecting this as master and jack allows us to actually control that. So now that we've got this first setup page taken care of, we can move on to the inputs tab because we don't have anything in the heli or the flight modes. We're going straight to the inputs. Now, the inputs tab is the place where you map your physical radio controls like your sticks and the sliders and your pots, and you map those to a software input to be used by the radio. So currently our radio only thinks that we're going to have 4 things that actually control the plane, and in reality we're going to need 8. So we're going to start with the throttle channel. So if we double click here, we will see that everything is perfectly fine and how we want to. There's nothing we have to do for the throttle channel. It's doing just great. So we're going to click OK, and we're going to go down to Aileron. And now there's a few things that we're going to actually have to do with Aileron because we are going to set up rates right now. So we are going to go in, and the first thing we're going to have to do is set the GV here down to 90, which this is going to be our high rates, because if you go all the way up to 100, it could actually damage the servos a little bit if you use it over and over and over again. So we're going to offset that by just going down to 90. Now we're going to set the curve to Expo, and all of these are also fine. And then our switch is going to be SA, which is the stick that I like to use for the rates, and up. And if we hit OK, now we see that we've got this first one, aileron. The weight is 90%, so at its max deflection will be 90%, and it's switch A+. Now if we right click, if we do lines and then duplicate, we'll see that now we have 2 things in here. And if we do that one more time, we do lines, duplicate, we have 3. So now if we click on the second one, we will go down to what the ailerons will do when this SA switch is in the middle. So first thing, we change SA switch to SA middle or minus. That minus is just saying it's not up or down, it's right in the middle. And then we're gonna go, and it looks like we're gonna change 90 to 70, and everything else is exactly the same. So we're gonna hit OK. And then if you want to have low rates, you'll do the exact same thing. Instead of 70, we're going to do 50, which are the lowest rates that we want. And again, change SA up to SA down. So now you can see here, if the switch that controls the rates for aileron is up, we'll go at 90%. If it's in the middle, it'll be 70%. And if it's on low, it'll be 50%. So we have to do the same thing for the elevator and rudder. So again, we're just going to right click, lines, duplicate, and do that one more time, lines, duplicate. And then we're going to go into the elevator, which will be pretty similar. In this case, I left it at 100 because, having max deflection on elevator is kind of fun. So leave it at 100, and then we're also going to set this to SA up. And this is because we want one channel to control all of the rates. Now you can put it on different channels if you want, but that might be a little confusing while you're flying to remember which switches to flip. And we're also going to set this to diff. That's all fine. So now we have, when it's up, it's at 100%, and then on these it is 70%, SA middle, and that's it. And then finally at the bottom is 50%, switch SA down, and that looks like it is everything matching. So now we have rates set up on 2 different channels, and we have to do this last one on the rudder. So we're going to duplicate and duplicate. We're going to set this at 100, and then we're going to do switch SA up. So I'm going to make the middle one then. I'm just going to edit it, double click. We're going to go SA middle, put that at 70. And then lastly, SA down and 50. Now that is all of the rates on aileron, elevator, and rudder. So I will do an example of what this all looks like at the very end, but this is just making sure you can change in between the high and the low rates on a switch. In this case, it's SA. So I'm gonna do one last check to make sure everything looks right here. And we're gonna move on to the flaps channel. Now, flaps is a little different than all of these other 3 because it only has, or it's a channel that we're adding, right? So if we double click down here, we have the input name, and this is what's going to display in your transmitter, so I call it flap, and it's coming from S1. We are then going to have 100 here. The curve is exponential, and the switch and the stick side, that's all fine. This is just saying that our transmitter is going to have something that controls the 5th input. We just want to make sure that we're setting it up correctly here. So we hit OK. We now have a flap with the weight 100 coming from S1 with no trim, perfectly fine. Next, we're going to have safe. So exactly the same as before. Safe, we're going to have the source is coming from SE. Source is coming from SE. And what else is different? We have an exponential, and all of these are the same. Good. So now we have flaps and safe, and our last 2 are pan and tilt. So just like before, we're going to go in pan. This is coming, and this one's important. So our source is coming from the trainer, or TR, and the second channel from our input source. And you're thinking, why not do 1? Well, we get 3 channels from our head tracker. That's pan, tilt, and roll. And now roll is set on the first trainer channel. We don't want roll because we only have 2 axes, pan and tilt. So we're going to set it on to TR2. We also have an expo curve here, and everything else here looks good. So we hit OK. We now have our pan channel. And then last but not least, we have tilt. So tilt. Source is coming from TR3. We have an exponential curve, and everything else is exactly the same. So now we're looking at this. We have all of our different 8 inputs. Now, that's not all we need to do. We need to then mix these inputs together in order to have a little bit more control. So we're starting, you might be thinking, whoa, what is all this going on? Well, this is saying that our throttle weight, perfectly normal, nothing to add here. But this bottom one is our throttle cut. So if we double click on here, we'll see that it is cut. Our source is the max, and we are going down to -100, which that means that the throttle is completely cut. There is no signal coming out of there. And for that, we have it on the SF switch, which again, you can change this to whatever channel or direction you want. I just like it on SF and up. The warning will be off, multiplex is replace, and everything else is the same. So now we have our throttle cut. So for the ailerons, elevators, and the rudders, nothing changes. Everything is just perfect how it is out of the box. And so we can move on to the flaps, or channel 5. So if we double click, we see that we have 2 different sections already. So let's double click on the top one, and we're going into flaps. Now this is called flaps up because the flaps are going to be up. And so if we go to, I'm first going to change the switch to SG, which is a much more natural position in my opinion for the flaps. And so I'm going to do SG up. The warning is going to be off. We're going to be adding. And then this is one more thing we have to change. The slow should be set to 1 and 1. This means when you actually want to have the flaps turn on or off, instead of it trying to be as instant as possible like the normal ailerons, it will deploy the flaps over a 1 second time period. And that'll make sure your plane doesn't just balloon up and fly out. So by setting these to 1 and 1, it'll just slow it down. So that's all we need for the flaps up. And you can see now it says slow right here. That's exactly perfect. We're going to do the same thing for the flaps down. We're going to change the switch from SA to SG. Again, that's just where I like it. No warning. We're going to add, and once again, we're going to have a 1 second on the slow up and down. Other than that, things look exactly the same. So we're going to hit OK. So that's all we need for the flaps channel. And we are going to move on to the safe channel. So if we just double click here, this is coming from i6 safe. We have nothing else other than that, but we do have to specify that the source for this is i6 safe. We click and that's all we have, i6 safe. Moving on to the pan and tilt, we double click. And so this is coming from TR2, the second trainer port. And so for the pan and tilt, I like having it on a switch. So if things start going horribly wrong, you can turn off the head tracker and the camera will reset back to the center. And in order to do this, you have to set the switch right here. And so I'd like to have it on SD up, and then the warning, everything else is good to go. So I'm going to click it OK. And then the tilt is the last thing that we need to change here on the mixes. So that is again coming from TR3, the third trainer channel, and we have everything is the same. Let's see, switch. So I got to switch that to SD up. So it'll only be activated when that switch is turned up, and we hit OK, and we're good to go on that front. So then moving to outputs, this is a part that will get a little bit hairy. So once we move over to the outputs, we are going to have to set what these names are. So in this case, we have throttle on 1, aileron on 2, elevator on 3, rudder on 4, flap on 5, safe on 6, pan on 7, and tilt on 8. And if we move over, we will see a few different things. If you've already built the IA Evo, you're already going to have some information in here. And that's because the elevator and the rudder servos need to be manually centered, different from their normal out-of-the-box state. So I'm just going to copy over what I had. For the elevator, we're going to need a negative 67.5 and a positive 128. And the rudder is not only inversed, but also it is negative 138 and positive 56.7. And then the flaps will go from, looks like negative 117 to 84. And that's just to make sure that the flaps don't go too far up or down, because we can actually control that deflection pretty well. And if it goes too far down or too far up, it'll just kind of mess with how the plane flies. So we're going to set it there. And then the pan and tilt, which are on channel 7, we are going to go over and inverse the pan and set this up to 150. And now this is the whole point of setting those extended ranges earlier, because then we can get more throw out of our head tracker on the top. So for pan and tilt, we are just going to set it 150 and 150. Ooh, I should also note that for the elevator and rudder, it looks like the center point is not 1500. It is 1345 and 1290. And again, if that made no sense why I'm changing that, go watch our part 1 video where we add on the elevator and the rudder, and then set those channel settings to be exactly perfect for your specific model. So if you've already done that, great, you don't need to redo it. But other than that, that's all we have to do for the outputs. This will tell our transmitter that not only do we have these set inputs and we mix with them, but it's also going to be what the transmitter is sending out to the receiver is these 8 channels. So we can actually just look through. We have no extra curves, no logical switches, no special functions, no telemetry, no custom screens, and no different enabled features. So once we are all finished up, we can click on this little X icon and then hit save if you want to back it up to your computer, which I would recommend doing because if something happens, it's good to just have a spare. I've already downloaded it. And then we are going to write the firmware to the radio. Click on it, and it says, do you want to set it up in this location? You say yes, you do all this. You have a really cool splash screen, and then you click write to TX. And once that's all done, we can go back to our bench, and then we can check out if this actually worked. All right, so now that we have the model all set up in our transmitter, we can go through the process of connecting it to the plane. So we're going to start by plugging in our plane, and it'll give you a nice 1 chime because there's no transmitter. And then we're going to hold the bind button, which is on the inside of the plane. We're going to hold it until it starts flashing orange. So you can see the orange flash. That's telling the receiver to go into bind mode. So now we're going to turn on our receiver, or we're going to turn on our transmitter with a really cool backsplash. We're going to go into our model. I renamed it to the UMX Turbo Timber Evolution Head Tracker. Hit menu and then page, and we're going to scroll all the way down until we find bind. So then we're going to click bind. We're going to get some chimes from the model, or from the transmitter. The chimes from the plane were saying that, hey, I found a transmitter, and the chimes from the transmitter were saying, hey, we found a plane. So now before we want to take off, we want to check all of our different switches. So first we have aileron, we have elevator, we have the rudder, we have flaps, which I set on this channel, and what else do we have? We have the rates. Remember I was talking about the rates earlier? So if we have rates all the way full, and I hold this all the way to the side, look at the deflection we got on this left aileron. Or I guess it's the right one, but look at that aileron. And if I click the switch to the middle, we immediately lose some of that travel. And now you might be thinking, well, I want all that travel. Well, that's the reason for having rates. You can set the different amount of travel for all of the different control surfaces. So that's the rates channel. I put it on this one. And then our throttle cut is on this back one for me, because when we're flying, it's easy to just flip it if you want to turn it off. But right now I can't throttle up, but I'm going to put the throttle down, turn the cut off, and then throttle up. So again, can't do anything like that. So that is the transmitter setup. Oh, we should also test the head tracker part. So I'm going to grab the goggles here. All right, so this is the actual head tracking module. And so what we're going to need to do is give it some power. And with our special 3D printed solution for this, we have 2 barrel connectors. One is going to get power, and the other one is going to get an audio jack, which will go into the back of our transmitter. So you can see there is a port on this side. And by doing that, we can page over. You can see our pan and tilt channel down there. Now I won't read anything yet because I haven't powered the head tracker on. So once I do that, you'll see the little lights turn on the inside. Oh, there's one. And our transmitter will start reading in information. So as you can see, we've got the bottom 2 channels are this head tracker. So if I turn this switch on, like remember what I was saying, how we can turn the head tracker on and off? If we reset the head tracker and turn the switch on, we can see our head tracker on the top there is now moving around. And you can also see on the transmitter itself, you can see the channel getting changed by this head tracker. So that's also showing that this is working. I took the camera off the top just for demonstration purposes, but as you can see, it is working perfectly fine. And let's say my head tracker, for whatever unit, is drifting a whole bunch up in this side, I can flip this switch and it'll recenter by itself. So to me, it looks like everything is set up perfectly on the transmitter for the IA Evo. Let us know if you have any more questions, and feel free to check out our Discord server because we always love answering questions no matter the mode or medium. So yeah, stick around. We're going to be coming out with a video that's also going over how to build slash setup slash do everything on the internals of this head tracking unit, as well as eventually where to purchase this double barrel connector and all the other 3D printed parts that we have on our whole unit. So thanks again for watching, and stick around for all of the new build tutorials on the IA Evo. Thank you.